Welcome back to Autism Live. You were just watching the A Word, and they're getting ready to go to the hospital in that episode because they're having the baby. And that it's like the I Love Lucy wiki is coming, but the new baby is coming. But right now we are joined in the studio by the fabulous Evelyn Gould, who is a BCBA, and she's here with us today. I asked you if we could take on the subject of bullying, to talk about it a little bit, because it is a new, fascinating topic for me that, I've always heard about bullying and always been concerned about it. And now this year it's a part of our world. And it's unexpected. Mm-hmm. It's unexpected in terms of what it looks like to me, and I'm kind of shocked that it's unexpected, and I'm gaining a new understanding, and I want to know more. I know you guys have been asking about these topics. So, I don't know what my expectation was, Evelyn, but I thought that bullying was this thing that happened to people far, far away, and that there were bad people who did it. And I just think that, with rose-colored glasses, that I don't know any bad children, because I don't know any bad children. And it isn't just bad children that engage in bullying. So I'm getting this bigger perspective of it about what it is, but I'm at a loss to know what to do. And I think, since everything else that has worked in my life to date has something to do with behavior, I want to talk to a behaviorist about this from a behavior standpoint. So talk to me a little bit about bullying.
Well, where do we start?
Yeah.
Well, I know we talked about it before, about some study that had come out, and there's not been that many studies on bullying with children with special needs, in particular. But the studies that have been done do seem to suggest that children with special needs might be at particular risk of bullying.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of reasons for that. But with children with autism, there's the kind of things you might expect, like perhaps they are suffering from some rigid rule-following difficulties or inflexibility issues, and maybe they engage in certain behaviours that draw attention to themselves that the children perceive as strange or odd or funny, and so on. So what we do know is that our children are probably quite vulnerable to bullying.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only are they vulnerable to bullying, but they're vulnerable to think that someone is bullying them when in fact that isn't necessarily what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of things. So yes, you can have children. I've worked with children who, for example, I can think of one child who had difficulty with understanding when things were accidents. Yeah. So when a child, say, bumped into him or trod on his foot, I remember treading on his foot by accident once, and it was like all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
And he did not understand that somebody could do something unintentionally, and he then would fly off the handle and engage in very aggressive behaviours, which then really shocked the person who had done this accidentally, so to speak. So that there's skill deficits there. There's other things to think about, is that sometimes other children can perceive children with autism as bullies themselves. Yes. Because that maybe our kids are engaging in, like, they don't understand how to appropriately socially interact with someone, or they don't understand how to share, or they want something and don't know how to appropriately get it, or they just are not following the social rules, or they just don't have the understanding of how other people think and so on.
So sometimes they can even say something that is wildly inappropriate, that another child takes as bullying when the intent wasn't there.
Yes, exactly. So like you can have, sometimes our kids don't understand, like, white lies, for example. Yeah. And your kid who's just being honest and just not meaning to hurt anyone's feelings, because they don't maybe even have that ability to understand other people's feelings, so they're just saying, like, oh, you're fat, or whatever it happens to be. They're just observing something and just saying it.
Right. That could be very detrimental to another child. I was saying to you yesterday that my new perspective on bullying, I really, I'm starting to see that there are the three different elements for me. How I'm starting to look at it is that there's the child who's bullying, there's the child who's being bullied, and then there's everybody else who's witness to it.
Right.
And that our child can be anywhere in that equation, and that there are different ways of looking at it. There are different skills, and it's a little overwhelming to me. And I'm noticing a couple of different things, that in particular with my son, there was some actual bullying that happened, right? But then he had such a reaction to it that anything that somebody said, he thought that was bullying. And so now I feel like even if somebody were to bully him in this moment, what he would say about it would be taken as, oh, well, you overreact to everything. I'm afraid that that's the kind of thing that happens. And I'm also afraid that at some point my child is now going to be the bully because he sees that it gets a reaction.
Yeah, and there is some evidence that could happen, you know, and one of our major goals as behavior analysts is to teach our children how to learn by observation.
Yeah.
And, you know, we teach our kids these wonderful skills, like how to observe something and then do it, but we don't want them observing and doing everything that they see.
Right. And you also mentioned something yesterday, too, that there are instances in which a bully will say something to one of our children, and because they don't understand, in that moment, the child doesn't register that it's bullying, and maybe they seem a little oblivious to it, but that doesn't mean that it's any less bullying or that it's okay, and that there is the possibility that as this child's skills grow, that they could have a reaction to it after the fact.
Yeah, right. That is something important to think about, that our children may not be aware that they're being bullied.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's problematic as on of itself. Like, at the time, we want to make sure that just because our child maybe isn't aware that they're being bullied, doesn't mean it's okay to keep bullying their child. But also later on, when that child starts to develop more complex kind of thinking skills and their awareness of themselves in relation to other people and what other people are thinking about them and so on, when those skills start to develop, there's a danger that the child will then have the ability to kind of realize that they were being bullied, and that might bring up all sorts of emotions and stuff for them.
Yeah, really incredible.
I mean, even I was thinking about this in the car on the way here, and thinking how even I, as an adult, and I have all these wonderful cognition skills and so on, sometimes I'm in an experience and something's happening or someone's saying something to me, and it isn't till later on that when I process it, that I think, that was really mean.
Yeah.
And why did that person say that to me? That was so mean. And I start like thinking more and more and more about it, and it kind of escalates into a lot of really hurt, angry feelings.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason to think that might not happen with our kids as well. Absolutely.
Good point. Point well taken. So can we start to look at bullying from a behavior standpoint? Because so much before ABA came into my life, things would happen, and I was just talking about this, I would be overwhelmed and feel like victim, and that I couldn't do anything about the fact that my son was engaging in challenging behavior. And what I learned through ABA is that if I looked at it as behavior and as communication, that I could take steps and that I could change behavior as a result of changing an antecedent, changing a consequence. So my question that I'm walking around with right now is, can I do things with my son to change his perspective on those three different places: bullying, watching bullying, being bullied, and are there things that I can be doing? Because the kids, here's the big shocker for me. I always thought that if somebody bullied my child, I was going to hate them. I don't. I mean, in one case, the bullying that was happening, while I don't believe that the child fully understood what he was doing, I know that his intention was to upset my son, and he did a good job of it. And this is a little boy that I absolutely adore. And I know he's feeling some things, and that was why he did what he did. He was lashing out because of things that were happening other places for him, not with my son. And so I want to understand, and I want to be able to do things to help that child too. And seeing that we all need to be concerned about that kind of thing. So talk to me from a behavior standpoint.
Well,
educate me.
Well, obviously as a behavior analyst, then we're going to be thinking about antecedents, behaviors, consequences, and so on, and like how we can change behavior. And I would think that we want to change behavior. We want to change the behavior of kind of what's happening around the context of the behavior that the bullying's happening in. So how other people who are observing the bullying, what do we want to do about that? The way the teachers, the school setup, whatever it is, we want to change the environment. And that is also changing antecedents. And then we want to also change the behavior of the bully, and we want to change the behavior of the child who's being bullied, and all those things are going to be important. Just changing one part might help, but it's probably better if we look at the whole context that this is happening in.
Yeah, it's a big machine. Is what
exactly.
It is.
So if we start with just thinking about the child who's being bullied, what we want to, as a behavior analyst, I'm going to be thinking, well, why is that child being bullied? What is it? What is it about them what skill deficits are they showing that might be contributing to them being a target for bullying? What behavioral excesses or, what problem behaviors or otherwise are they engaging in that are drawing attention to them, that are making them targets of bullying? And then I want to put in place interventions that are going to build those skills. So one thing that we know is that children who make friends or have good friendships are less likely to be bullied. Yeah. They're definitely not going to be bullied, but they're a lot less likely to be bullied. And then, of course, having peers that are supportive, this idea of peer advocacy. And if you have friends, then you're more likely to have people around you who are going to help protect you from bullying, or are going to tell someone if you're being bullied, and so on. And I think peer advocacy strategies have been quite successful actually at decreasing bullying. So I'm going to look at, like, with the kids that I work with, what skills can I teach them that is going to help them make friends and help them decrease any behaviors that are drawing attention to them.
I just want to add, though, in terms of what you're saying, in case anybody's mistaken, we're not saying that it's the child's fault that they're being bullied, but they're more vulnerable to it. They're more likely to be picked on. And, just like we used to see the Jack LaLanne you're too young, but the Jack LaLanne cartoon where he would be the scrawny guy on the beach and somebody would kick the sand on him, and he decided, I'm being picked on because I'm scrawny, so I'm going to go and work out, and then nobody's going to pick on me anymore. We're not saying that it's okay for the bully, but if you can strengthen something so that you're not as vulnerable, it's a great way to. And we were going to work on these things with our children anyway, right? So and what I'm saying is, from my point of view, is that I'm not. It's not that I'm not interested, but I don't want to just spend a lot of time talking about it and deciding whose fault it is, or why it's happening and so on in that way. Like, I just want to know, how can we make this better? I think that's the parents' cry.
How can we just help this child right now to be less vulnerable to being bullied and help them deal with it, other children and so on. And this is just one part of the picture. We also have to look at what can we do about the bully's behavior. How can we help them not be a bully?
Let's talk about that, but let's take a break and come back and talk about that, because it's all very fascinating, and I want to tell you what my son said to me yesterday. It's amazing. So stick with us, because we're going to talk more about bullying with the wonderful Evelyn Gould, BCBA. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with Evelyn Gould, BCBA. We're talking about bullying. I was sharing with her during the break that, and we've been talking about this from time to time, on camera and off camera, that my son went through some bullying stuff this year. And I've been, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And talking to people and, trying to come up with a plan and, thinking about writing some sort of play to work on with the kids from that perspective. So I, busy mom. And I picked him up from school yesterday, and he was saying about how we were talking about the summer and kinds of things we're going to do over the summer. He said, I need to get some stickers over the summer, a bunch of stickers. I said, okay, do we need to stop and get some now for tomorrow? No. We're just doing the practice for 3 days, and then we're going to do the real thing in the fall. I said, what real thing? A couple of weeks ago, there had been an incident during choir where a child had said something in the bullying nature to my son, and my son started to cry, and one of the other girls in choir stepped up and said to the boy who said something, that's not okay, you've done that to me before, that's bullying, and you're not going to get away with it. And then, hugged my son and said, it's okay, he's done it to me before too, I'll stick with you. And together, these two children, during recess, my son had a sticker book of Star Wars stuff at school, and so he ripped out all the stickers, and they were offering a free sticker to kids who would sign up to be on their no bullying group that they're starting in the fall. And so if they signed up, and they have the little piece of paper, and if they signed up, then they got a free sticker. But it was just a practice, because they're going to do the real thing in the fall. And he even said to me, I'm not going to have as much time to play, Mom, because this is going to be very serious. But I was so proud of him that I'm sitting around spinning my wheels trying to figure out what I'm going to do to help him, and he kind of took care of it himself. And I'm a little amazed. You were saying he's using his ABA tools.
Yeah.
He's reinforcing them beforehand for not engaging in certain behavior. I'm very impressed with him, and I could weep. But I also
and there's absolutely fabulous problem-solving skills going on there, and it's really you should be very proud of him. I'm proud of him.
Yeah, really. Well, and you should be. I mean, it's all a part of. I certainly didn't do it by myself. He had a lot of help from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders to get to that point.
And when I'm saying that we want to teach our kids skills, like those are the types of skills that we want to teach our kids. We want our kids to be able to solve social problems that they encounter, so they're not reliant necessarily on us to try and fix everything for them. I mean, that's quite an advanced skill, but that is where we're trying to get to, and to be able to for our kids to be able to tell us when there's a problem and then help figure out their own solutions. And this idea of like getting peers involved is just so important, and I think that really is probably the key to really fixing a bullying problem in a school, because we can talk to teachers and teachers can get trained and be very effective at what they're doing, but they're not there all the time, and they're not really the whole environment.
Because most of that happens as they're coming onto the school grounds, as they're in recess, while they're in lunch, as they're leaving the gate. It's not stuff that is within teachers' control. But really amazing, and I have to say too that if it hadn't been for that little girl who stepped up and said, no, you did this to me before. And by the way, the boy who was doing and saying the things, who had been a little bit of an issue earlier in the year, when she stood up for my son and said, no, you're not going to get away with this, then he felt bad. And the next day he came in and apologized to my son, and has been really sweet to him the rest of the year. It's very and here I was thinking, I have to do something, and feeling guilty because I haven't figured out what it is yet, but in a way the kids are sorting it out for themselves. I don't want to leave it up to them because I think they need guidance, but it's kind of amazing.
And again, thinking about it as a behavior analyst, we've got a consequence strategy that was in place, and that was the little girl saying, that's not okay, and this is not okay, you're not getting away with this, and I'm going to tell somebody, and then potentially going and telling somebody. So you've got your consequence strategies, but your son and her are now putting in place the antecedent strategies, which is the preventative strategies, and that, as behavior analysts, we're very much about preventative strategies and changing the antecedent. So by going and offering these stickers and setting up this anti-bullying group, they're hopefully going to prevent the bullying, because that's really what we want. We don't want to just have effective ways of giving consequences to someone who's already done the bullying. We don't want the bullying to happen in the first place.
Right, absolutely. Well, fascinating. I know before the break you were saying that there were things that we can do with and for the bully in terms of behavior, and I'm really interested in that. What kinds of things do we need to be thinking? Because for the kids who are being bullied, we were thinking of how to strengthen skills so that they're less vulnerable. But what kinds of things can we be doing with the bully?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Well, I mean, that's assuming that we know who the bully is. One of the problems can be that we don't necessarily know who's doing the bullying. So it might start by educating teachers, and as parents, you're going to be the best advocate for your child, and you're going to be the number one person who's going to be going to your school and saying, my child's being bullied, or I'm afraid that my child might be bullied in the future, and you're going to probably want to get something put in your child's IEP and so on. But you're also, once you've made the school aware, then it's going to be about the school figuring, being vigilant and observing what's going on and trying to figure out who the bully is or who the bullies are. And then I guess approaching the parents of those children and seeing if you can work together with some kind of putting in place some strategies to change that child's behavior. And it might be something very simple. It might be like, in the case of your son, where it just requires a simple consequence of saying, explaining to them that's not okay, what you're doing, but it may not be that simple. It may require a lot more input. You may even have to get a school psychologist involved or something like that, or a BCBA or someone involved if the problem's severe.
But I think what I'm hearing is that we don't have to just accept it and say, okay, well, that's that child, and let it go, because I don't know where that ends. My son's in 3rd grade right now, and it's really interesting to watch the little seeds of how this starts to take place, so that by the time that they get into high school, it gets ugly.
Yeah, and the other thing is, we know from the research that has been done is that bullies, as well as those who are bullied, but bullies, the outcomes for bullies in terms of like mental health issues and so on is really quite poor. Bullies end up suffering a lot as well as the people who are bullied. So it is really important to help those children as well. I mean, some children who bully will grow out of it, so to speak. I mean, my brother is one of those people. He was a complete nightmare. One of my brothers was a bit of a nightmare when he was a child, but once he developed a bit more empathy and a bit more understanding, and his cognition, his social skills developed, then he stopped, and he's now a wonderful human being. And he was, once he grew up a bit. But that doesn't happen with a lot of children. A lot of children don't grow out of it. They're struggling with a lot of issues for various reasons. We need to think about that. We need to think about the function of why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
And they are going to need help, because they are not, the prospects for those children can be quite bleak.
Yeah. It can be really hard, though, as you were saying, identifying who the bully is. And sometimes, depending on the school, I've heard parents report this before, that the school knows who's bullied your child, but they don't release that information to the parent. So there's a little bit of a loss of control sometimes, in the hopes that other people are taking care of what. I think it's really important that as parents we take it really seriously. And if you're aware of the fact that your child is bullying, that's a great time to pull out all the stops, put things in writing to the school, say it's happening.
It's very important to put things in writing, because really, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so if the sooner you get stuff in writing to your school, the better.
Yeah. And I think too, I think sometimes we worry about stigma, that, I'm going to be the parent that's constantly, creating a problem. And if I'm going into the IEP, I don't want to be making waves about different things. And I think it's important in these cases where there's multiple players that you don't sit quietly by the sideline, because you stepping up and saying, okay, even if I don't know who the bully is, there's a child that's bullying my child, the school knows who it is, and if you put it in writing, they're forced kind of legally to deal with it.
They are.
Or there's consequences for that. It may mean that child gets help that helps them in a way that you can't even imagine.
You can't even imagine. Other children as well. It may help other children.
Yeah.
Prevent other children from being bullied. It may create a whole change in the way the school approaches bullying, and really, more importantly, it's going to help your child, and just always thinking about your child. Don't, ahead of any worry that you have about what the school thinks of you or anything like that. It's not about the school, it's about you and your child. Yeah.
So don't be afraid in terms of that. Be a squeaky wheel, especially in this
there's
arena.
A lot of resources and people out there who will help support you. You don't have to feel like you're alone in dealing. If you're feeling like you're getting into a battle with your school, you don't have to feel totally alone. There are organisations and things out there that have put together a lot of resources for parents. Yeah. They have put together things like letters, like templates for letters you can write if you're feeling overwhelmed about where to start with that. Yeah. There's procedures to go through if you're not getting the results that you want from the school. There's people who very simply outlined the laws in terms of bullying and harassment for special needs children and so on. So there's a lot of people out there who want to help.
Yeah, there's even toll-free numbers on, there's a government site, I think it's www.edu.gov, that you can go to, and there's toll-free numbers that you can call, that they'll tell you who in your state and who in your county can help you if you're having issues. But really important to put things in writing to the school. Email counts. We had legal counsel on a couple of weeks ago, and they said email counts as in writing. So
yeah, I mean, I think one of the first steps is just to write a letter to your principal expressing your concern and asking them if they have a bullying policy in place. First of all, and get a copy of that. So that'd be your first step. And then ask for a meeting. And then if you're not getting anywhere, then probably going to one of these sites and seeing who it is outside of the school that you should be contacting next.
Really good advice. We're going to take a break and come back. I'm just checking the time here, and come back to talk more with Evelyn Gould. So stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with Evelyn Gould, a BCBA. We've been talking about bullying in some very practical behavioral terms. And I was just mentioning to her that we do the question of the day. And the question of the day today was, what has been the hardest thing for your child? And overwhelmingly, you guys have written in about making friends in social situations. And this is one of the things that we were talking about that we can do if our child is being bullied, that we can target helping them to overcome certain things so that it's easier for them to make friends, which will make them less vulnerable to bullying. And we're sort of right on point today because totally different question. What's hardest for your child making friends? And here we are saying that part of what makes them vulnerable to bullying is not having that core support group of friends. So what kinds of lessons? I've been talking on the show about, here we've got this space of time coming up this summer, and usually you have a reduction, unfortunately, in services, but it's time that we can be more effective, more efficient members of our child's team and target different things. I've told everybody there's a special right now on skills, which is what I use. Buy 1 month and you get the whole summer for free. What kinds of lessons are in skills that we could potentially work on? You know, every child's different, so we're going to be different lessons for different children. But what kinds of things are in there that might help our child to gain friends in an easier way?
Well, I mean, very simple lessons like simple skills like your child knowing how to initiate an interaction with another peer, which seems just so obvious, but sometimes our kids just don't even know how to approach a peer, and they really want to. So not all kids with autism, it's kind of a myth that all kids with autism don't want to interact with peers. That a lot of people seem to think that, like they have no interest in socializing, but that's really not true. A lot of our kids really want to, and they just don't know how to, and that's quite heartbreaking to watch. So working on our kids being able to know what's an appropriate way to approach a peer, and then once they learn how to do that, it's like how do you start a conversation, or how do you join in a conversation if there's already one going on? How do you talk about something that people are interested in? Like how do you teaching our kids play skills? Like we talked before, Shannon, about teaching. It's important to teach our kids how to play things or be able to engage in certain things that their peers are interested in. So, I mean, that could be just teaching them how to do it, or maybe you have to work harder and you have to try and help them be interested in those things. Also, you know, knowing what to do when a peer approaches them, like maybe, and they're playing, and teaching them things like how to share and how to take turns and things that how to follow kind of certain rules or be flexible about rules and stuff like that, because other children aren't as patient as us, and and
they don't have ABA team teaching them what the rules are, and sometimes they don't know, and my child will stand there and go, but you have to take turns, and you know, like, oh, not everybody knows that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've often actually worked on with my therapists is teaching them how to play like children. Because one of the problems can be is that when we do have a child that we work with from very young and we start playing with them, is that the therapists tend to act like adults, and they let the child win, and they let the child lead the play and so on, and then I come in and I totally play like a child and annoy the child, and just everyone's getting upset. But that's what our children are going to have to deal with. So it's very important that the therapists that I work with know how to play like a child and challenge our children and help them cope. And it's amazing what comes up once I go in there and start playing like a child. Suddenly, this child who seems like they don't have any difficulties, all of a sudden, you know, they really are having a lot of difficulties, and that then helps us program for that. So we're then, he really does have a problem with if I win, or he really has a problem if I'm like, no, I don't want to play that, I want to play this, or no, I'm going to go up this mountain like this, and he doesn't want me to, you know. So the flexibility thing is a really big issue, I think.
Okay, so really wonderful things, and there are individual lessons for each one of these things and skills, but there's other things as well that, like, just in terms of, and again, we should say too that you're not left completely to your own devices figuring out. You take an assessment to see where your child is, and then you're given a pool of activities that are suggestions, and then you get to pick and choose. But it's really fascinating the way you guys, because you were a part of the team that created some of these things and skills, and it's really fascinating how you guys put it together. As a parent, I love it.
I mean, there's so much. It really depends on where your child's at and as to where you're going to start, because you've got your language skills that you need to be able to have a conversation or be able to communicate with others. So it doesn't have to, we're not just talking about massive conversations about complicated things, we're just even talking about simple communication. And then that can be vocal or non-vocal. And then you've got your social skills, like taking turns with someone, how to initiate an interaction or invite someone to play with you, those types of things.
Even prosody. Yesterday, the day before, our word was prosody. Our child could potentially be being bullied because of their lack of prosody, or even having a difficult time making friends because the friends don't understand what they're saying because they're not inflecting in a way that they can be understood.
Yeah, and I've actually had a child who we had to work on prosody with. He was doing absolutely fantastically in so many ways, but then he had some inflexibility issues, and prosody was causing him problems because the kids were making fun of him. And he was having a really hard time. So even those kind of skills, teaching kids how to understand, like, absurdities. And jokes and humor, and then even like things like general knowledge. Like we would teach our kids like some general knowledge stuff, so they actually have some stuff to add to conversation and so on. And then you've got a whole other bunch of skills which are related to understanding what others are maybe thinking, or like making inferences about what someone might like to do based on their preferences. And those are really, really important social skills that allow us to have good relationships with people. And reading people's body language, using body language and so on.
Yeah, because if they're, we in our terms that as moms, with my group of moms, we talk about how some children are bossy and some children are inflexible, right? And they could be mistaken for the same thing. But if your child is going up to a child and saying, hey, I want to play cars, and it's a little girl who only likes to play Polly Pocket, you're not going to have a successful interaction. Whereas if your child thinks to themselves, okay, well, I know that Luella likes Polly Pocket, and they go up and say, hey, Luella, can I play Polly Pocket with you? Chances are your child is going to be more successful in that interaction. It's a lot of things to think about, and I've shared recently that my son did a project at school, and there was kind of something that was going on, and later on when I talked to him about it, I realized that he was doing a better job of doing perspective taking than the other children in the classroom. And that if we give those skills to our children, that sets them up for success. So having them consider the other person's, I think they're going to be better adults. We have seen from time to time, and I know it's that time of year in the summer, I was saying this last summer because we had 3 young men working here at CARD that had recovered from autism. And I said, really, sharp guys, virtually indistinguishable from everybody else who's working in the building, right? Except, you know how I could tell them from everybody else? They were extra polite. Didn't you? Like if you went to go and get on the elevator and they were like, oh, let me hold that door for you. How are you today? Don't you look lovely today? And they were just uber polite.
They're very charming.
Which I have to say, as a mother, I kind of love that.
Very charming and very, I don't even know what the word is, but just aware of other people differences, like very kind of accommodating, or they have an understanding of like different people are different and that's okay.
And acceptance.
Different people think about different things and that's okay. It's quite amazing.
Right. A peacefulness and an acceptance about, I do things my way, you do your things, and there's no judgment about that.
Live and let live, very much of live and let live attitude. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I really think we should make all children go through these lessons. And actually, too, can I say just another, because I talk about the executive functions curriculum all the time and how I think everyone should do it and how I'm using it. And I was saying today is the last day of the school year and that I have all these things, the teacher gifts, and I make DVDs for the kids of all the pictures. And it's always just like a scary time of the year for me because there's way too much. And frequently, I was up too late last night. I'm just going to admit that. But I was done by 11 o'clock. And this is the first year that he has gone to school and that I've gotten the teacher gifts together and gotten the DVDs together and been done at 11 o'clock. Usually it would have been 2:30, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And it's because of the executive functions curriculum, because I've started to think of what do I need to do to set myself up for success. Now, I'm a work in progress.
Well, I was working on mine yesterday because I talked to you about, Shannon, about trying to draw flow charts. And then I talked to my supervisor about stuff. And then as I was doing these flow charts and trying to figure out how to do them, I was thinking, this really helps me. This is really helping me plan stuff and understand how stuff works.
Yeah.
So we're all working on our.
Yes.
Or we all can work on our executive functioning skills.
Yeah,
definitely.
I'm hoping that next year, maybe it'll be 9 o'clock the night before that I'll be done. Or maybe it'll be wild and crazy and I'll be done a day early. That would be shocking. We'll report back next year. But so I'm just slightly underslept today as opposed to being completely underslept and harried. And everything still got done, which is nothing short of amazing. What else on your list there?
Well, I think
so many things, right?
There's so many lessons to teach, but that's only part of it. So you definitely need to work on lots of these different skills, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. But it's really important that we can somehow figure out how to give our kids the opportunities to practice these skills. And at first, it's important to be practicing with yourself or a therapist or someone who's teaching these skills, so that your child gets someone who's responsive to what you're working on and knows what you're working on before you start taking it out into the real world and dealing with what that brings. But once you're ready, you've established those skills and your child's fairly confident in using those skills, it's really important to try and figure out how you can get peers over. And I would suggest that starts off by being a peer that is going to work with you and work with your child and support your child's learning. And that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about this before, and it's quite difficult sometimes to find a peer that's willing or is suitable for working on peer skills with your child. Yeah. Sometimes we tend to I've tended to maybe choose a child who's a wee bit younger than the kid that I'm working with, or a wee bit behind in terms of development compared to the child that I'm working with, because that can kind of help your kid it just kind of helps because the kid's not quite where your kid's at, so they kind of are doing a bit better, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense, because I tend to go one way or the other. Either have a child who's significantly older, like not an adult, but somebody who's almost a teen or a teen, because they're going to have a little more patience and you can talk to them ahead of time, or the child who's younger, who's not going to be frustrated and have an expectation that your child can or cannot do something that
exactly. So that's what I was coming to as well. So, or you might want to choose. Sometimes we do choose the children who are a bit older, and kind of quite often you can find it, or I would find a child who's excited about being a teacher, or just being involved. So it's a minefield of trying to find the right child for your child. And it can change depending on what you're working on.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that I think we're going to show in a few minutes, because it's hard to find the right child, and sometimes you got to have a plan and you do all that, and then other times you just got to throw caution to the wind and go to an event. And one of the things that I loved to take Jem to, which always gave him an opportunity to meet new people and have an opportunity to talk to them, was that we would go to the Home Depot on Saturday mornings. They have on the first Saturday of the month, so it's once a month, they have a kids workshop. It's free, and they give them a kit that you open up, and it has instructions, and they have to hammer and screw drive and paint whatever the thing is that has something to do with the current season or month. The July one will probably have something to do with the 4th of July, like it'll have a flag in it in some way. And so they have these tables set up, usually outdoors, although I think in different places around the country in the winter it's indoors, but usually it's outdoors. The kids are all out there, and they're, between the ages of 5 to say 10 or 12, and they stand at tables, and the parents are there too, and they interact, and then they usually get a chance to play with whatever the toy was that they built together, and it's free, and it's a place where you can take your kid, and you're gonna have the opportunity. Somebody's going to be standing next to them, and at some point they're going to say, "Hey, can you pass me the glue?" Or your child can say, "What color are you going to paint it?" It's and it's free, and you're going to find kids
you
there.
really are going to have to be creative about finding those opportunities, because it's very hard to find peers sometimes. And then remembering that at first you're going to need to support your child with the peer, and you're probably going to need to direct the peer to say the right thing, or prompt the peer to engage with your child, or whatever it is, and setting up these kind of opportunities, like you're saying, like seeing an opportunity for your child to say, "Can you pass me the whatever," or "What are you making?" or something like that.
Yeah.
But eventually you want to fade yourself out of that.
Yes.
So remembering that the goal is that your child's going to be able to do this without you there.
Right. But not being afraid to prompt for a while, just fading it back.
You definitely shouldn't just go from working with your child at home to just, here you go, off you go, and use your skill, and assume that your child will be using it. I mean, some children will, but that's not normally the case. Like, normally the kids, you're going to need to support them a little bit, or a lot, even in the beginning, and then you can gradually fade yourself out.
Yeah. What I love about the Home Depot is that the opportunity is there on a regular basis, and I can take my child there, and if my child blows it with a child, that he says the wrong thing or ticks the child off or whatever, the next time we come back, he's not sitting next to that child. So when you blow it with a kid in the classrooms, you get kind of stuck with a situation, and it builds throughout a year. But when you go to those kinds of things, you can just stand in a different place and you never see that child again. But if they make a connection and you come back the next week or the next month, then they stand next to each other and they start to interact, and you forge a friendship. Really kind of amazing. But again, people can be using skills over the summer to shore up some of those friend-making skills that are so important. There's kind of an endless number of lessons. There
is. I mean, we can all improve on everything, but I think it's very important to try and do some kind of assessment and figure out where your kid's at, and what are the most fundamental basic skills that they need first of all, and then working on those, and then you can build on these other things. Don't get too overwhelmed by the massive amount of stuff that you feel like your child needs to learn. You just get in at the bottom with the fundamental things that they need to learn first.
Okay. All right. Well, it's time that we have to say goodbye to you. It's flown by so fast. But we will have Evelyn back in the studio next Wednesday. You're available to come back next Wednesday. And as always, I want to encourage you guys to write in if you have questions, even if it's, we're not going to be live here in a second, but if you have questions for Evelyn, all you have to do is write in. We know where she works, and we can find you and ask you questions, yes? Thank you so much. This was such good information about bullying. It always enriches me when you come in here and tell us something, and it gives me things to work on. So useful. Thank you so much.